Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Chicanery. Are you tired of hearing my voice yet? You're probably tired of hearing my voice. I am Danny, and of course, my wonderful co host, JT.
Hello again.
And this is the 2025 Rolex 24 at Daytona recap. Uh,
First
insert
episode of the year.
Yes, it is. Insert the old Cruisin' Daytona intro song here. I'll need to see if we get in trouble for that because I might do that in post if we don't. But I digress. Um, so yes, is Daytona another banner year? Lots of stuff going on. But before I go any further, I posted a bit on I hijacked the podcast Twitter account for a bit periodically throughout the race. But I did once again want to thank everybody for coming to join me or JT and I periodically as we were live throughout the course of the race. Super fun to get to interact with folks on what is certainly my favorite event on the motorsports calendar. Um, but effusive displays of thanks aside, I guess we should probably jump right into it. And as has become tradition around here, we always kick these episodes off with news, and well, this is no different. And we are starting with, just general thing happening around the paddock, just kind of set the scene here. First, it's worth noting that Austin Cindric joined the number 64 um, Multimatic Mustang for the Rolex 24. He filled in for Ben Barker, who broke his collarbone while skiing over the off season. Race drivers and interruptive injuries right before big events name a more iconic duo. It seems like we've had a surprising amount of this here in the last couple years.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm genuinely shocked that team owners and team principals don't just start telling their drivers no, you can't do this. Or better yet, you're going to have to be on house arrest for the entire off season and you can only do exercises at the gym that's probably at the shop or your own house, but aside from any extracurriculars, going out snowboarding and skiing or hiking or biking, whatever, you're not going to be allowed to do that.
Yeah, because like I said, I mean, we've had Ben this year, of course, the saga with David Malukas breaking his hand mountain biking, Bowman jacking up his back in a late models wreck. Chase Elliott, didn't he break his leg skiing or something?
It's
I
like
think.
snowboarding or skiing or something. It was
Yeah.
sometime
So
in the middle of the season.
but my point being is that in the last 2 years, the amount of high profile drivers that have significantly hurt themselves in off-season extracurriculars is kind of wild. Um, but I digress. Um, Next on the list, of course, after Ryan Priest's massive accident, feels like forever ago now. I don't actually remember when that was. I feel like that was probably 2 years ago, almost now too. But at the summer Daytona race, where the bus stop Le Mans chicane is, they yoinked up the grass, and so it has reprofiled the chicane a bit. It's tough to say, but given the fact that there seem to be more lines, dare I say it's a little bit wider now than it used to be. Um, because before there was functionally only one line through there, and it seems like we have multiple. Jury?
I don't really know, to be honest. I would say, yeah, there's probably multiple lines now. I guess given the fact that you have, at least there were people trying to make passes through that area now. I mean, it has happened in the past. I don't know. More recently, I don't know. It could have happened previous years. I just didn't know, but it seemed like there were a lot of incidents or almost near misses where it's a GTP car almost taking out a GT car in that same area, but I don't know. I know they definitely changed the curbing, and I think the curbing might have caused some issues. I mean, there were a lot of suspension failures as a spoiler, but there were tons of suspension failures, and the speculation was that was probably due to like people running over the curbing. And again, the curbing is just was not as friendly as it was in previous years.
Yeah, yeah, certainly pre-grassless chicane, you had to be brave or stupid or some combination thereof to try to make a pass stick through there. But yeah, but to your point, the line through there before was you're basically all four wheels on the curb, or curbs, through that section, and it seems like that comes with much larger risk now. But spoilers, we'll get there. Um, in other driver related stuff, Alex Lynn missed this year, unfortunately, due to illness, which was a real bummer to hear. Um, I like Alex quite a bit. Uh, and it just is a shame that he couldn't make it because he was sick. But in the rumor mill that got people talking, there's been some chatter about some sort of potential collaboration between McLaren and Ford on a hypercar project. And I must say, seems pure flight of fantasy. I cannot stress that enough. But it is something that has been circulating more and more. Well, reached kind of a fever pitch to the point that the IMSA Radio RS2 guys were talking about it a bit in the overnight hours. But thoughts on a potential McLaren Ford tie-up in hypercar GTP?
I don't have any complaints about it because, another manufacturer in hypercar is always a good thing, that's always fun. However, do I believe that this is actually going to happen? I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Same with like Mercedes starting a hypercar program. Okay. I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when there's an actual car on track because, they could say, it's one thing to say, float around. Yeah, we're going to start a hypercar project. But then actually doing it is a whole nother thing. And then, you know what? They could also be like Audi and make a car and be like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then at the last second decide actually, you know what, no, we're not going to actually do this. And then you know what, you got fooled, you got duped. So I'll believe it when there's an actual car on track, you know but because I don't know, at least for me, I refuse to get sold dreams again. But whatever. And I guess apparently the thing was that they disagreed on the engine or something. Like I think somebody wanted a V8, somebody wanted a V6 or something, and that's where it kind of fell apart a little bit,
Yeah,
allegedly.
so it's worth noting that there are a few things at play here. First of all, it seems like I'm hearing more on the chatter from the Ford side than I am the McLaren side. Zach Brown did kind of comment on the rumors, but what he said was to the effect of, we kind of got our hands full with F1 right now. Maybe shrugging emoji, which is possibly the most moderate statement that Zach Brown has ever issued. But that's a discussion for a different day. But yeah, I had missed that bit about disagreements on powertrain. I wonder who wanted what, because they both have some precedent for both 8 and 6-cylinder engines. Of course, in the big McLarens that Ricardo built, but Nissan derived twin turbo flat plane V8 that's used in 750S, W1, etc. Yeah, on the V6 side, of course, the Ford and the whole powered by EcoBoost brand thing, if you remember from the old Daytona prototype days of, at this point, 10 years ago, with the 3.5-liter EcoBoost, but also their V8 stuff with the Coyote architecture, and then McLaren with the hybrid V6 in the Artura plus their Formula One connections. So that's curious that they can't decide, given that both brands could ostensibly do either pretty easily. But But yeah, like you, I am of the "I'll believe it when I see it" variety. It could be
I guess
kinda neat.
somebody was talking about it in, like, the least little group chat that I'm in, and it was apparently McLaren wanted a turbo V6 and Ford wanted an, NA V8, so naturally
Huh,
aspirated V8, basically with a Cadillac, I guess.
interesting. Okay. That kinda makes sense, but also, given that both alright, that's curious. That's to be fair, about what I expected, but yeah, like I said, you talk about, branding and even just engineering difficulties. It shouldn't be that difficult for either to do either. But I mean, because if you really made me choose, I'd pick the NAV8 because I mean the Cadillac sounds incredible, and at least until the Valkyrie arrives, it is comfortably the best sounding car of the grid. Though the Acura sounds pretty good too, to be fair, using the IndyCar engine. But yeah, hmm, alrighty. But but yeah, but if they're disagreeing on an engine solution, then there ain't no snowball's chance in hell that this is going to happen. Assuming that is the case, of course. But moving on, because for once the news segment was actually kind of short this time, which I am deeply appreciative. Um, GTD and GTD Pro classes were split for qualifying this year, which is a new thing, and it actually seemed to work. Usually, having all the GTs bunched up results, well, frankly, in shithousery of the highest degree. And we didn't get that. Everybody was pretty well behaved. We got the number 120 Wright Motorsports Porsche on pole in GTD and the 64 Mustang in GTD Pro. Um, but amusingly enough, that was really where the calm sort of started and stopped. Whereas the prototypes had a whale of a time. Um, Qualifying for LMP2 was red flagged because Spike the Dragon spun and couldn't get going. But the 22 United Autosports LMP2 would go on to claim pole. Um, GTP started out with just everybody doing a few exploratory laps before the 25 GTP stopped in the infield area, which would see the session red flagged with the car being towed back to the garage. And actually, the 25 didn't end up setting a time at all. As such, session resumed with not all that long left, and it resulted in the 63 Lamborghini and the 60 Acura banging doors, heading on to the oval section of Daytona and nearly wiping both of them out in the process, trying to set a quick lap. Although it wouldn't mean anything because it was the number 93 that would end up, albeit very briefly, going fastest in the session until, in quite possibly a turn of events that nobody saw coming, the number 24 BMW GTP would be the one to snatch pole. Which, when I saw that graphic on Instagram, I had a wait, is this legit? Moment. Hmm?
I mean,
But
I don't know. I was genuinely shocked. I'm like, because as soon as I saw the 25 car stop, literally, like, just in the middle of the infield area, I'm like, oh, it's over. Like, this is gonna be a long weekend for BMW. I can see it right now. But then the 24 car got pole, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe there is a little bit of hope. Maybe it's not over.
yeah, like I said, I was just, I mean, we've talked and talked and talked and talked and talked about it. We've beat this horse to death. Uh, the BMWs, particularly the GTP program, say that 5 times fast, Lord, um, has had just, it's been frankly a pretty torrid affair this last, 2 years. Um, And so to like put up a pole position like on merit was certainly not what I would have expected. Though, in fairness, I'm very proud that it did. We talk about seeing these kind of glimmers of pace out of this car. And so I guess this could be another false dawn. There's an argument to be made that it kind of was. We'll get to that. Um, but but I don't know. I'm feeling hopeful. But at any rate, moving on to the race itself. This question almost doesn't need to be asked, but it's a customary one, so we'll do it. Good race or not?
Good race to me. I mean, in my opinion, it was an all-timer. It's absolute cinema.
Yeah, I'd say this was a fucking banger. There's no two ways about it. Daytonas are pretty much always good. I can't think of a year that I have been flat out disappointed in a Daytona. Maybe if you go back to the kind of lean years when everybody was leaving in like 07, 08, just because there weren't a ton of cars on track, you could maybe argue that year wasn't quite as good. Those years, rather. But beyond that, Daytona's always pretty great. But this definitely, certainly in recent memory, this is top of the pile. This is, it's incredible. But interestingly enough, to start out, everybody was actually super well behaved. We had one of the LMP2s was backwards. I can't remember who it was. I can't remember if it was like TDS or maybe one of the United Autosport cars. Right at the very drop of the green flag, but they got it turned around, carried on, no yellow, no nothing. It was fine. Everybody avoided it. And we would go on to have the longest green flag run at the start of a Rolex 24 since 2020, which is kind of insane when you think about it. But unfortunately, one of the potential contributors to a yellow flag period did not survive very long. The Lamborghini GTP died in like 2 hours. The car pit and then was taken behind the wall and just never came back. And apparently it was just a quote terminal issue. I had heard on the IMSA radio broadcast that they were thinking it was overheating of the internal combustion engine. I don't know if that was ever truly clarified. I know we had talked a little bit about it when we were live around hour 5. But did we ever get an official cause of death for that?
Never heard anything.
Okay. But I wonder if the SC is gonna be like the BMW, because it seems like they just cannot get this program together like at all. It has been so bad.
I mean, to be fair, I feel like BMW might be just a little bit better than this program. Like, I mean, by a lot, not by a long shot, but I mean, like at least a little bit better. Because it seems like I don't know, like there's glimpses of hope at least that BMW will be able to finally like get stuff together. I mean, Lambo, I don't know. I mean, part of it could have been because like Iron Lynx, I think they're with Mercedes now. So like that whole thing with them leaving Lambo as like a manufacturer could have caused some issues, but I don't know.
Yeah, but it's wild because I think somebody did the stat and it was like 34 laps was all that the SC63 got in before it went kaput, which is just like that's dreadful. uh, so so yeah, I'll be interested to see what happens. Also, I know they were only running the enduros last year. Are they doing that again this year?
Yes. Which I
Which is
thought they
also
would have done a full season this year, given the fact that they're not in WEC anymore, and you don't have to worry about splitting and like being stretched too thin on resources and personnel or whatever. And I also thought they were gonna run 2 cars as well, but I guess none of that happened. I don't know what exactly fell apart and where, but they're only doing the endurance stuff this year again. So it's like I'm really not quite sure what their plan is. I'm not sure what they're cooking, but hey.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's part of why I was asking. So I'm like, "Well, there's your fucking problem." It's like you're not. It's like you have, relative to all of the other prototypes, you have very little like real development
Well, it feels
mileage
very
that's been logged.
half-assed, I'm not gonna
It
lie. Like,
does.
it feels like this program is very much half-assed compared to at least all the other manufacturer, like, GTP programs. Like, there's just, like it feels like there's just minimal effort, and just, like, nobody really gives a fuck. Like, they're just here, but are we really present? Do we really care if we're getting good results out of these races we're at? Maybe, maybe not, it's, hey, whatever. It just doesn't seem like anybody really truly cares, which, maybe there's people who do care, but I don't know. At this point, I don't really know if this program's gonna like last any longer, to be honest, which to be fair, I kind of felt like if it was gonna be any GTP or like I guess hypercar LMDH, LMH program, whatever, that wasn't going to have much longevity. Honestly, I was suspecting it was going to be BMW or Peugeot because it honestly seemed like they were the stragglers compared to everybody else. And it just seemed like, again, it just took a long time to finally get stuff to where they wanted it to be. But it seems like I feel like now my opinion has changed, and I feel like it might be Lambo, honestly, that is the first one to be the first ones to have a grand opening, grand closing, and fold up their program, honestly.
So, at least in regards to Peugeot, I prefer the term plucky underdog. Thank you very much. Um, and but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just this program feels very phoned in, and I can't quite explain it. I don't know if Iron Link's departing has maybe done more damage to this program than we realize right now. Um, when slash if it folds, that'll be when we, I guess, kind of figure that out. But yeah, but the two-car requirement for hypercar and WEC seemed like a gold, and Lamborghini leaving as a result felt like a golden opportunity to run a full season in two cars here, only for them to just do the enduros. It's like, again, it's like, what was the point of developing a whole car if you're basically going to show up in one series,
It's like,
four
just
times a
commit to
year?
one series. Just commit to one series and go and put all the effort and energy and resources into that. Like, okay, either IMSS or a WEC. Like, if it's too much to do both, again, just pick one or the other. Okay. Obviously, I don't know. As it stands right now, maybe I think I would prefer to just go all in on WEC just because that gives you the opportunity to run at Le Mans, and Le Mans is pretty significant. Um, and everybody wants to win Le Mans just like they want to win like all these other like big name events. But it's like I don't know. I just again I don't know what they're cooking. I don't know what we're cooking. I don't know if we're cooking. I don't know. I don't even know if we have the ingredients. I don't even know if we're in the kitchen. Or even if we're in the kitchen, I don't know if the lights are on, the appliances work. I don't know. I have no clue. And apparently Riley Motorsports is supposed to be taking over the Lambo on the IMSA side since Iron Lynx left. But I'm like,
Huh.
I'm not sure what they're gonna be able to do, honestly. Like, I'm not trying to be negative or nothing, but I just like again, I'm not really sure what they're gonna do, or I'm not sure what any other team is really gonna be able to do at this point. Because again, the program feels very half-assed. It doesn't really feel like anybody cares about it that much. Aside from maybe the drivers, I mean, since shit, they're getting paid, or everybody's getting paid to do this, but it's like, does anybody really care about it? I mean, again, I'm just not sure it's gonna last much longer, unfortunately.
Yeah, so actually, then that begs the question: who is functionally operating these cars right now? If Iron Lynx is gone and Riley's supposed to be coming later, is Lamborghini just basically have a blank check in their hand right now to run
I
this
have
thing?
no idea. I mean, I thought it seems like, I guess Iron Lynx might have been operating it at least at Daytona for the 34 laps that it did total. But I think after that, maybe like they'll show up at Sebring and Riley Motorsports will be the one operating it. I don't know when like they were supposed to hand the shit over or nothing. Like I also don't really know how that whole process works.
Yeah, I don't either.
So I don't know. I really honestly have no idea what's going on with this program, if I'm being real.
Yeah, same. That's why I'm asking you. You're usually a little bit more plugged into this kind of stuff than I am, so I figured you might have an idea, but well, clearly not. Which just shows, well, I think that really goes to encapsulate just the complete and utter shit show that this car has been in its, not quite year of existence. Um, but yeah, that's interesting. But moving on, the number 75 of the 75 Express, uh, Mercedes had mechanical issues and went behind the wall. Granted, both Mercedes, that and the Windward Mercedes, did not have a very good time at Daytona this year. They both had all manner of various mechanical issues. And in fact, I seem to think both in the end would end up succumbing to overheating. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. Um, but I can't remember what it would have been at this stage with the number 75 because it like I said, in the 57 both pit so much over the course of the 24 that really I should have kept a log of each time and what it was, but they had a bad time. But for all of the hullabaloo over a BMW GTP pole, it wouldn't be BMW if they didn't find a really just catastrophically stupid way to fuck it up. And they did. Uh, Dries was coming into pit because it was the end of his stint. And he was entering the pit box at just about the most, well, I say obtuse, but the most oblique angle imaginable. And he just kissed the wall on the driver's side because he scraped the front dive plane a little bit, and it just completely borked the pit stop, because the tires, that front, the driver's side front tire, I don't know if they ever actually got it changed, but it would have been basically impossible because the front tire was practically in the pit wall. And then they ended up getting a penalty for improper fueling because of, again, the weird ass way that they had to basically service that car. It's just so stupid.
I I don't know. I mean, stupid, but I guess on brand to be honest.
I mean, you're absolutely right. It's very on brand for just a dumb procedural error to be what costs, at least some time for
And to be
BMW.
fair, there were like a lot of instances of people like pulling into like their pit stalls crooked that was actually not just like that one incident with Dries that happened earlier. Like there was like so many other times where it happened like throughout the night. I think even Porsche, somebody had an
Hmm.
issue where they pulled into the pit stall crooked as well. And it's like I don't it's like this is this not like race car basics or whatever? Like I mean, like how to pull into a pit stall, your pit box straight. Like I don't know. It's like it's like nobody at this race could have pulled into a pit stall straight to save their fucking lives. And I don't know what the cause of that was. I don't know if it's just skill issue. Mercury was in retrograde. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, it was only a 16% waning crescent the night of Daytona, so we can't even blame it on the full moon because there wasn't one. But yeah, you're absolutely right because it was one of the first pit cycles for the night stints, and the number seven Penske Porsche pulled in crooked as the number 6 was trying to leave, and it created a whole fuss. Um, because both cars cost each other some time in the pits. But you're absolutely right. It was to the point where when teams started double stacking, I genuinely got a bit scared that it was going to end badly for somebody. Um, But but yes, just Drees's thing. And then when the pit lane reporters were trying to talk to him and he was being all ragey about it, but just like it's like, dude, you're the one that goofed it. Because as one of IMSA Radio's pit lane reporters put it, I was like, I don't understand why he's so mad about it. There's a big Empower banner on the side to tell you where to go, which was remarkably catty for even the IMSA Radio guys who just do not care at all. um, but not too long after that, we would get the first full course yellow for the TDS Motorsports LMP2, stuffing it into the tire barriers. I think it was at the Western Horseshoe was where that happened, or on the entry too, if I remember correctly. Which again, that just seemed like a skill. I think it was they goofed it because it was their outlap. That's what it was, and just a lot of people had been getting caught out at that spot on outlaps and Colt tires. Um, but yes, because you tweeted basically the win and or was it when was the first full course yellow going to be, and why was it going to be because of an LMP2? Well, you were correct as always. You were right. And I mean, to be fair, death taxes and LMP2s being a meme class are all kind of inevitable. So it's not super surprising that it was an LMP2 that would be the first full course yellow. But yeah, so just LMP2 things. But a little later on, because it's worth noting that it would actually stay pretty quiet for a while. It wouldn't be until the number 93 Acura stopped on track with drive shaft failure. And wasn't it didn't Pillow, hadn't he like just taken over the car when that happened?
I think so.
Yeah. And that would cause another full course yellow, which would actually be remarkably lengthy, but it was partly because where the car was stranded, it was not in a great spot. But it gave us quite possibly one of the greatest single stints that I have ever seen in endurance racing. Kamui was Kobayashi was during that the full course yellow and subsequent pit cycles was put in the number 40 Cadillac, the chrome Dex Imaging car. And that man, it was what, 8 or 9 overtakes in the space of like 2 or 3 laps. And then proceeded to just drive away from the rest of the GTP field. It's one of the greatest things I've ever seen, quite honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it very much sucks that it didn't last. Foreshadowing, obviously.
Fucking damn, don't
Um,
remind me.
but because I mean, honestly, it was like him and Brandon Hartley were the ones, seemed to be the only ones who were able to actually get like some semblance of pace out of the Cadillacs, the Wayne Taylor Cadillacs. Like it just like they just didn't have it this year, which was kind of shocking to be honest, because they did have favorable BOP compared to everybody else, but they just were never really there.
Yeah, actually, and speaking of which, I want to backtrack just for a second because you mentioned that. When I read the adjustments, because again, we talked about this a little bit live. The way IMSA is doing BOP now with like acceleration and like power and torque curves, it's a lot like the way WEC does it. Granted, IMSA's parameters are slightly different, but it's still functionally low and high speed. Acceleration is what they're targeting with BOP using combination restrictors, engine software, so on and so forth. But when I had read the BOP adjustments and that the Cadillacs got like a 30 horsepower boost overall, I'm like, they don't fucking need that. The Cadillacs are always bananas quick at Daytona. It's like you're gonna give them more. Um, but yeah, I just thought that was actually something kind of interesting to point out, for anybody who may have missed our live sessions. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's wild how just kind of lost the Cadillacs were this year. So maybe IMSA was onto something with BOPing, or at least trying to help them. but but yeah, it was, again, like I said, one of the greatest stints I've ever seen. Um, to pull the number 40 from absolutely nowhere in the GTP field to a very comfortable lead. Um, but as you said, it would all end up being for naught because we had another full course yellow that was brought out by the 007 Aston Martin. So that's the GTD Pro Heart of Racing entry, which lost the driver's side rear tire. And that was that coming out of turn 6 where that happened? I think it was. But it's just wild because this is the second year in a row that it has been Ross Gunn and the 007 Heart of Racing Aston Martin losing that specific wheel at that specific corner. Like,
Nah, I
I'm
don't
not.
think Ross Gum was in the car at that time.
Was he not? I thought he was.
No, I think it was Roman DeAngelis.
Oh, okay. But okay, that's fair enough. But everything else was exactly the same about that incident. It was, I guess barring driver, it was everything else was identical, which I'm not really a coincidences kind of person, but that's just kind of, well, honestly, kind of odd and very funny. Um, but yeah, but they would go and get that retrieved, which again, another lengthy one because at turn 6, well, you got a lot of track to go, and of course, the car has to be towed back, flatbedded rather. But it would all go disastrously in the full course yellow. Kamui would hop out of the number 40, and it would be Louis Delatraz that would take over. And it didn't go well. Delatraz just fucking looped it at T1 completely on his own, no assistance whatsoever, and caused this horrible bottleneck that stacked up the field. And it was just this cascade of crashes. You had the 22 and which is the United Autosports LMP2, and the 73, which is the Pratt Miller LMP2, which is very odd to say. Which they ran into each other trying to avoid the stricken Cadillac. Then you had the 9 Pfaff Lamborghini and the 48 Paul Miller BMW, the 9 hit the 48, once again, trying to avoid all of this. I feel like there was another GTP that ran into the Cadillac, and I don't remember who. Because I feel like that incident collected not just the 40, but somebody else. I don't remember. Do you remember? Huh.
No, I only remember it being like LMP2s and GT cars that got collected in it.
Yeah, I have to go back and look through the race, see if I can find an archive race report and some of the incident reports. And if I can find something conclusive, I'll pop in a little editing bit here. Yeah, that's bothering me. I'll figure that out later. But yeah, but there were quite a few cars involved. It ended up being like 7 or 8 cars involved in that whole thing. Well, involved in running into the Cadillac, basically. You had the number 5 Proton Porsche and the 25 that had a bit of a coming together, and you also had I feel like there was something else, but at any rate, yeah, that whole thing was it was messy and horrible, and all because Delatraz had a skill issue at T1, which
And
is
I think the BMW, the number 25
yeah,
and the number 5,
that was
like that was a whole separate incident.
yeah, it was a whole separate thing after, yeah, but Yeah, but I made the joke in a group chat, like father, like son. If you're familiar with his father, Jean Denis. Jean Denis was useless in Formula One and had stupid accidents a lot like that. Um, but yes, but no, the Proton Porsche and the BMW coming together was a separate incident. The five was ultimately handed the incident responsibility.
Which was interesting because it seemed like everybody on the broadcast, like the broadcast I was watching, which was like the NBC broadcast, they seemed to think that the 25 BMW was at fault for the incident. They thought that I guess he came down a little bit, and the 5 was kind of just holding his line, but I don't know.
Yeah, to be fair, I was like I said, I don't much care for the NBC broadcast. I never do. So I do Radio Le Mans. And to be fair, they thought the exact same thing. They had apportioned the blame on the BMW. Um, so I yes, I'd be curious. I mean, to be fair, I know IMSA has access to, of course they've got full telemetry access, steering traces, throttle traces, brake traces. They've got access to more camera angles and what have you than even the broadcasts do as well. So it's possible that they saw something that neither broadcast booth did, and that was what it was. But yeah, I do find that interesting. I didn't know that. Um, then moving on, the 81 Dragon Speed Ferrari decided that it wanted to do a little bit of gravel cleaning, and it ended up in the wall, which was interesting. And then the DXDT Racing Corvette would get turned and would end up stalled on track, which would cause a full course yellow. And I didn't actually know this until seeing your notes, because that restart was aborted. Um, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out why. But as it turns out, it was the number 31 Cadillac was apparently not maintaining speed, and that was why. Because there were some questions on the IMSA radio broadcast about why the restart had been called off, and I didn't see a message from race control about the aborted restart.
I mean, I saw it. I think
Okay,
I don't know. I don't know if they gave him a penalty. I think it might have just been like a warning or something. So I
I
think
think
they
it was.
usually do that. I think they usually will give you a warning if you don't I guess maintain speed, and then afterward, if you still don't do it right, then they'll start handing out penalties. But that was what the cause of that whole thing was.
Okay, yeah, yep. I guess I just missed it. So that's good to know, because yeah, I didn't see the race control message, and nobody else knew what was going on, at least where I was watching. So that's a good bit of information to have, because I was very confused. Um, but but the not too long after the restart, the number 31 Cadillac with Fred Vesti behind the wheel would suffer a suspension failure on the banking at what is basically NASCAR's turn 4, and made huge contact with the outer barrier. And as you remarked in the notes, and I thought the same thing at the time, it was a very NASCAR type crash to have, actually. Um, and it was a wild thing to see, because the first folks weren't quite sure what happened, and then suspension failure. Um, the number 5 Proton Porsche would suffer a suspension failure as well. What, like a couple laps after? It wasn't very long after Vesti's massive accident that the Proton Porsche broke. Um, and that car would be retired.
Yeah, that was very disappointing, honestly, because they were actually doing pretty well.
Hmm.
He's like
Yeah,
on Lauer. I mean, he was putting down an absolute clinic.
yeah. I mean, we talked about it when we were live, but he was every bit as quick as the factory Penske Porsches. Actually, for a while, he was occasionally putting times that were faster than both of the Penske Porsches. So it's a real shame to watch them be denied because I think they could have at minimum been on track for a podium. Um, but it wasn't to be. The number 25 BMW would get a stop-go penalty for breaching the final wave-by procedures, which I'm not really even quite sure how you do that, if I'm being perfectly honest.
That's what I was so confused about too. I really didn't know how that happened. I just saw it in the race control like messages, and it said, "Oh, like 25 car 25 like stop and go penalty, like stop and go for like 3 minutes or something." For like improper wave by procedures. I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know how you. It's literally like playing a video game and then you get the little message in the top of the screen when you do something that says new achievement unlocked, but instead it'll say like new penalty unlocked, which is like, I mean, it's like, I mean, very much BMW like to somehow get a penalty that's like, hey, I don't even know how we managed to do this, but it happened. Which, funny enough, the same thing happened at an IndyCar race last year with Roman Grosjean. Race control seemingly invented a whole nother penalty to give him um, out of like thin air, like some like unsportsmanlike conduct or something penalty. And it's like, again, I don't know, like again, like new achievement unlocked, but it's a penalty. It's like I don't really know what they did for that to happen, but clearly they did something wrong.
Yeah, I don't know, because I mean, just with the wave by, that's just as they're, basically re-racking the field with each of the respective classes. So that's really all that the final wave by is. So, like I said, it's like, how
How do
did
you
you get
get
a
that wrong?
penalty? Yeah. Yeah, I'm saying, how the hell do you
Like
get
if
a
you get a
penalty?
wave by, then it just means okay, go around everybody else and you get the lap back. It's like
Hmm.
what? How do you mess that up?
Yeah, that's ridiculous. But yes, very BMW to goof that. Um Not too long after that, the number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus. I can never remember which is the GTD Pro and which is the GTD car. Is it the 14 that's Pro, 12 that's not? I think.
Yeah, I think it's the 14 is the pro car, and then the 12 is like just the GTD car.
Okay, yeah, because the color accents on those cars, I mean, they basically look exactly the same. So my brain can never quite remember which is which class. Um, but yeah, it ended up going behind the wall. Um, due to just due to mechanical issues. And actually, it's funny seeing that because I want to rewind here for just a minute. Um, you know that the I think it was the Wright Motorsports Porsche, one of the Lexuses, and somebody else. I don't remember who now. But they were having it was I think it was might have been FAF. We're having issues with the basically the telemetry from basically the fuel sending unit in IMSA, and the fact that a lot of teams were having to make additional stops because IMSA's telemetry didn't jive with the actual like fuel they were putting in the car. Um, and I find that very interesting. It's like, did we ever get a root cause for that?
I didn't even know that was happening, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, it was a thing because lots of cars were making well, several, I shouldn't say lots, but several cars had to make unscheduled stops. Um, and so as the pit lane reporters were talking to folks, they had noted that yeah, just basically telemetry discrepancies, and just to make sure that they didn't get penalized, they were just stopping again and throwing a little bit of fuel in the car, and apparently that was enough to fix the issue. Um, but so yeah, I'll have to do some looking, and if I can find anything, I'll insert a little note um here about what exactly the root of that was. But yeah, anyhow, moving forward, the DXDT, what a tongue twister and a half, racing Corvette would end up, it caught fire. Um, it was on the banking, and it's just, again, the car's just like whole ass on fire, and then it pulled into the grass, um, right by one of the fire marshal posts to be put out. Everybody was okay. I mean, the car was, burnt up, but driver was totally fine, um, thankfully. Which, as a pretty ardent a Corvette racing fan, that's spooky because then my brain's like, okay, are the other one's gonna catch fire? Which thankfully was not the case, but oof. Um, but this took our Corvette count from 5 down to 4. So the 2 factory cars, the AWA car, and then the TF Sport car that was basically being operated by Trackhouse for the day. Um, but we would have more drama in GTs as the 27 Aston Martin GTD, that's the non-pro Heart of Racing car, got turned by the Wright Motorsports Porsche, the number 120. But there was no action taken. Which again, so I'll be interested what the NBC broadcast thought versus IMSA radio, because IMSA thought that the 120 was at fault in that, and were a little surprised that there was no action taken.
I mean, it seemed like the NBC broadcast was a little bit surprised too.
Yep.
And probably, I think, seems like they thought the same thing, but obviously they didn't get a penalty. I mean,
Yeah, okay.
it seemed like it should have been like a slam dunk penalty, honestly, but hey.
Yeah, again, same thing. I figured, I'm like, okay, it looks like the Porsche, because I think it was through the chicane where that happened, if I remember correctly. And everybody was like, okay, well, that's clearly on the Porsche, but yeah, no action taken. And there would be a spate of penalties. We got finally got a well, there had been a spate earlier in the race of mechanical black flags due to tire pressures deemed too low. It's thought that because the cooler than anticipated track temps probably had something to do with that. So we had some cars pitting to fix that. And then was it a BMW that got a mechanical black flag as a result of torque output being higher than allowed? One of the prototypes got bopped for it, and I don't remember who. But that was a thing. So, but ultimately, the early nightfall was very eventful, but things kind of quieted down as we got deeper in the night and progressed towards daybreak. But boy, when we got to daybreak, we would get a full course yellow due to the number 04, the crowd strike, going off in the infield area. I can't remember where this was. This might have been, I think this was between the 2 horseshoe sections, I seem to think. And would end up in the tire barrier. The car would actually go back out, amazingly. That wasn't the end of their day. And then we had another full course yellow due to a few odd. The GTD was just having a moment. And it would see some cars broken. The 21 Triarci car of Pierre Guidi was just going way too fast into the corner. It's such a weird ass accident. That's why, and of course I'm reading your notes and I watched the accident happen and my brain still has a hard time putting it all together. But yeah, just lost it and got stuck in the tire barriers, which took a recovery truck to get it out. And
Yeah,
much
there
like
were
you,
honestly a lot of, I would say, uncharacteristic mistakes from a lot of people that you just wouldn't expect to see mistakes from, or at least the kind of mistakes that happened. I mean, there was that earlier, like during the night, there was like a full course yellow, and I think it was like the 6 Porsche car. I think it was the 6 like Porsche GTP, like whoever was driving that, I think it was Matt Campbell, like spun under yellow, and it's like I don't know
Mhm.
why that happened either, unless it's just cold tires, like that's the seems to be the like common denominator here, but it's just like why are people making these mistakes?
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, and yeah, but it was in much like, the following note, and but true is that it was this weird sort of chain reaction of separate incidents, but basically all ended up in the turn one runoff all the same. And then yeah, you have the Lone Star Mercedes, which that was, and some other cars were involved, and it was just you had like 7 different GTDs just hanging out in the runoff area at turn one. And it's just like, oh, it was quite the accident to try and unpick, to be honest. Um, and now we get to probably the juiciest part of this year's 24. Paul Miller Racing versus Corvette Racing by Pratt Miller. Um, so because of we'll set the stage a little bit here. Of course, the 48 was what 50 some odd laps down, 55, I think. Laps down at the time of this due to an earlier incident. No fault of its own. I mean, it sucks, but I mean, this shit happens in endurance racing. Um, but well, for a change, the the Z06Rs actually had some legitimate pace. That wasn't on my bingo card for the race, given how poorly they qualified. But I mean, hey, we'll take it. Um, but that being said, the BMWs I think ultimately were a slightly faster car, um, because the number 4 Corvette was actively being hunted by the number 1. Um, but the number 48 decided to expedite that process just a little bit and was blocking the number 4. So it was Augusto Farfus in the 48. It was Connor DeFilippi in the number 1, and it was Tommy Milner in the number 4 Corvette. Um, but the number 48 was given a penalty for blocking, and I don't know if it was a kind of miscommunication or perhaps somewhat punitive, but the number 4, because it was coming out of turn 6, was when race control actually handed out the penalty for blocking, so coming on to the banking. And Augusto's just slowed way the fuck up and backed the 4 basically into the 1 and had all 3 cars nose to tail, and the number 4 Corvette suffered some rear end damage and would end up being black flagged for it actually shortly thereafter. And this would functionally end up ruining the number 4 Corvette's shot at a class win. Tommy Milner, who was in the 4 at the time, made it very clear that he was unhappy to the point of opening the window and sticking his hand out on the banking, which, I mean, these cars are doing about 175 miles an hour at that point on the banking, to give Augusto the one finger salute as he's pulling into the pits to serve a penalty. And this lit up social media, with the general consensus being is that was some iRacing bottom split type driving from Augusto Farfus. Tommy was very angry and when he got out of the car because he ended up handing over to Nico Verone. Tommy was pissed. And it was to the point that I think Farfus, through BMW after the race, ended up putting out a statement basically as trying to defend himself, not doing a particularly convincing job. But I digress. And Paul Miller turned off comments on all of their socials after that as well. But I'm curious what you make of the incident.
At least for me, like honestly, like it was very annoying, I'm gonna say. Like as somebody who was pulling for BMW Paul Miller to actually do well in this race, Yeah, I it was very much annoying. And I'm actually the type of person where I'm like, I support the rights and wrongs of my favorite race team, whatever. But in this instance, I don't think I can defend this, to be honest. Just because I'm like, it was very unnecessary, was the thing. Like, they were in a pretty good position, like all race, pretty much had a decent car. They stayed out of trouble, it seemed like. For the most part, they got through nighttime, which again, nighttime is arguably one of the hardest parts of endurance races. It's like, honestly, like once you get through nighttime, like I would honestly say you're like half the battle, like at least like 80% of the battle is already done. You've already fought it and won. Um, and really all they had to do was keep it clean, stay focused, stay locked in, keep it cute. And it's like we really didn't need to be harassing the Corvettes as much as they did. And it's like it was just unnecessary. And it's like, I mean, to be fair, I feel like BMW honestly had like more, like they were faster than the Corvettes in general, and also like in the long run, they were also quicker. So there really wasn't a need for them to like tell Farfus to like hold up the four, because eventually the one was going to catch the four anyways, like on again long term pace. So it's like it was just very unnecessary. And I'm like, maybe I'm gonna partially blame sleep deprivation for some of the poor choices that were made here. Because I mean, shit, like obviously sleep deprivation is going to cause you to not make the best decisions. It doesn't matter if you're a teenager or you're 25 and older and your frontal lobe is finished developing. You're still gonna make pretty bad choices, and maybe that's what this was. And they face the consequences for the choice that they made. They have to, they made the bed, they have to lay in it. But it is very disappointing that they kind of did this when it was very unnecessary. But hey,
Yeah, and so I have a good friend of mine. If you're listening, Tyler, hey bud. But yeah, he's a diehard BMW guy. Always has been. And we talked about this incident a bit, like right when it happened, and he said basically this. Actually, I've got Instagram open right here, so I can have a look and I can read this verbatim. Um, but yeah, because he was like, because I posted this in my stories, and he was like, this makes me so sad. He said, he said, I really wanted this win, but it would be so tainted. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, this is shit. The BMWs are a faster car, and they didn't need to do that. And this was right after, and we'll get to this bit, spoiler, but the number 4 got its get back, needless to say. And he was like, yeah, they could have 100% reeled in the Corvettes. And that's absolutely correct. I think long run pace, the BMWs were faster. And this whole thing effectively cost both the 4 and the 1 a shot at class victory. Um, but yeah, this was just so dumb. Um, you know, and I don't know, maybe Farfus feels like he's got something to prove after functionally being demoted from a prototype drive, and that was part of what spurred this as well. That was a thought that had crossed my mind, but
I would say that might be a little bit accurate, just because, like, again, sleep deprived, you're not going to be making the best decisions. But it's like, I mean, come on, like, I don't know. It's just like, because even having something to prove, I guess, because I would definitely say that maybe you could be possibly like right, just because like even if the team told him to do what he did and slow up the four, like okay, you're still a grown adult and you have your own brain, you can use your own discretion. So you could, for all we know, like you technically could just like disobey what your team tells you to do. If I don't know, if you feel so morally obligated to do so and be like, no, I just don't think that's right. If you're the type of person who's like, for lack of a better term, like a purist, it's like you feel like racing should be clean and respectful, which it should be, and you should have respect for your opponents, regardless of how you may feel about them personally. But if you're racing people, it should be like with some amount of respect. But it's like, I mean, like technically he still had the choice to not do it in a way. I mean, you might face a little bit of blowback from the team because you didn't do it, but in the long run, it would have been beneficial.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I know a lot of folks wanted to point out, because I mean, don't get Tommy, especially during his stints in the four, I mean, he was very racy, but I mean, here's the thing, I mean, Tommy has been doing this, well, frankly, longer than you and I have been alive. He will race you hard and he will fight tooth and nail, but he'll always keep it pretty clean. That's the reason why Tommy has been in the Corvette program for what, probably 15, 20 years now at this point. Is for that very reason. But he's not going to sit here and, actively block or annihilate somebody. Now, you can't say that for his teammates, but, um, um, but yeah, this was just, I mean, in the biggest way, like I said, is that this was just stupid. This was a very stupid thing to do. Then this was a very stupid way to generate controversy.
And
And
honestly,
insult.
one of the dumbest ways to bottle a race. Like honestly,
Yes.
like that's why it just infuriates me so much because it's just like it was just so unnecessary, and they would have had it in the bag had they not done this. Because like, I mean, I guess spoilers, but it's like again, Corvette got their lick back, and it's honestly, it's like again, like you're telling me nobody on the team, nobody on Paul Miller. It's like you didn't think that they weren't gonna retaliate against that, like because especially since their race was ruined. Like once that happened, their shot at winning this race was effectively over. And at that point, I'm sure as soon as that happened, they didn't give a fuck anymore. They didn't give a fuck. They were out for blood. They were very vindictive, and they were going to make sure that y'all were not going to win the race either,
Mm-hmm.
even if it meant destroying one of their own cars in the process. But you damn sure were not going to get that win because you destroyed their chances at winning in a very dumb way. It would be one thing if it was just, hard racing and how the chips fell. It is what it is. Somebody was on, somebody got the short end of the stick, but it was just very deliberate and egregious. And it's like, again, I'm not going to defend it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I said, it's unfortunate. Part of why I love IMSA so much is, not only the variety of cars, but the fact that folks race each other, generally will race each other hard but clean. But this felt like some, DTM finale type shit that went on here.
Foreshadowing again.
Yes. But at any rate, we would have an interruption. Because the number 88, actually, like literally right after this initial kerfuffle, the number 88 LMP2 stopped on track and caused a full course yellow because Tommy was being interviewed when the number 4 team started cheering in the background because the 88 stopped, and it gave them the opportunity to try to fix the car without losing too much time. And then not too long after that, the Wayne Taylor Racing Lamborghini, basically the chrome Dex imaging Lambo, would stop on track and get a full course yellow, and this resulted in a very late race restart where it got spicy. So it turned into a scrap between the GTD Pro. It was the 65 Mustang, the number 3 Corvette, which entered the chat out of nowhere. That car had been nowhere all day, and then suddenly was just there. And the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW. But then you had the 77 AP Racing Porsche, which got
It's
was the
the
meat.
AO Racing Porsche.
Oh, AO, yes, thank you. It was Rexy, duh. I was like, AP Racing sponsoring a car. I don't remember that being a thing, but I might have missed something. When there are 61 cars on track, it's easy to miss the particulars. But yeah, got sandwiched in between a Mercedes and some other stuff, and basically had its whole front bumper torn off as a result. Um, Rexy lost his mouth, which honestly, it's actually given the fact that they very heavily anthropomorphized that car. It's kind of freaky seeing the car not have a front bumper, like more so than usual, which I didn't expect. Um, but yes, that car would suffer some damage getting sandwiched in between. I think it was the Windward Mercedes, I think, and um, and some other GT cars. But then you had the number 24 BMW, which out of nowhere just started porpoising like a 2022 F1 car and just bounced around no end. Um, and it's like, what? Again, I never saw an official cause of what happened. Was it like a bushing failed somewhere or like a spring failure somewhere? And that's why the car started bouncing like mad? Because this had not been an issue up until the last, like, what, 40 minutes of the race.
I mean, I have no idea what happened. All I know is the team said they basically couldn't fix it, at least in the time that was left in the race, and they would just, I think it was Drees was in the car, and that he would just simply have to deal until the race was over.
Yeah, it's like talking about, compressed vertebrae with the way the bounce, 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 bounce. Um, but yeah, but you're like I said, much to your point, there was just BMW just kind of shrugged and was like, okay, well, we're just gonna have to deal. Um, but the car would basically, what would happen is it would shake itself to pieces because, funny enough, prototypes aren't really designed to bounce up and down many times a second at you know, well, if that's parts of the circuit, better part of 200 miles an hour. And so the nose cone would shake itself loose practically, and we would end up with a tire rub, and this would basically end the 24's day. Um, then you had also, like, around basically at the same time, the number 6 Porsche Penske got penalized for cutting the Le Mans chicane because apparently, I guess they didn't do it correctly, because there is a procedure for if you have to bail on the chicane, and I guess they didn't follow that, and so they got functionally got penalized. Basically, race control said to give the place back. Um, and so they ended up behind. Is that the 60 Acura that they ended up behind?
It might have been.
I think it was. Um, but then Spike the Dragon, AO's LMP2, had to pit for a battery change, which basically ended their race. Because, I mean, it was so late in the race when this happened. And they couldn't, between the time spent fixing the car and then the time to it just in the pits generally, there just wasn't the time to recover. And I seem to think that they got a penalty for improper fueling as well
Yeah,
shortly
I think they
thereafter.
did.
So yeah, that was their day. Their day was just done. Um, and then, of course, the GTD and GTD Pro classes were getting spicy because you had the Wright Motorsports Porsche, and that was one of the Ferraris. Oh my god, was it? No, it wasn't Dragon Speed. Was Who was that? Oh my gosh. I am drawing a complete blank. But it was the Wright Motorsport Porsche, and one of the Ferraris were fighting tooth and nail, and the AWA Corvette as well, for class honors in GTD. And then you have, of course, Mustang, Corvette, BMW, the 65, the 3 at this point, and the 1, with the number 4 Corvette kind of hanging off the tail of that group. So you basically had the GT leaders in both classes. You had top 2, top 3, top 4, separated by, a second and a half tops. Yeah, I mean, it was so maniac, much to what you said in the notes, that it's difficult to keep track, because now I'm trying to remember who was what was where, and I'm like, wait a minute. Um, but we would have Paul Miller versus Corvette Racing Part 2 um, would rage on as the number 3 felt the need to avenge its fallen brother. And it was Alexander Sims that was in the car at this point, and he left no quarter against the number 1. Um, particularly heading through the going into the Le Mans chicane, he just fucking dove it and made it, well, functionally made it stick. It was a big move. But this argument would come to about as spectacular an end as you would think. Um, with the with Nico Verone and the number 4, the damaged number 4, just sending Kelvin Vanderland in the number 1 to Mars. It was heading into turn 1, and this was apparently a separate incident between these two cars at some point earlier, but yeah, it was he just sent Kelvin to orbit, and yeah, that was basically it for the number 1 having any chance at winning class honors. Now the number 4 was penalized for the incident, which I mean, yeah, fair enough. Although it's worth noting that the sort of, well, first it's worth noting that the number 1 had braked actually quite deep heading into turn 1, and had the number 4, well, I just don't think he stopped. But if you pay attention to the broadcast, you notice that the number 1 in this incident just lightly tags the number 3, because the number 3 actually runs a little wide on corner exit at turn 1. So this could have collected the other competitive Corvette if this had gone wrong. But yes, that was what brought a lot of but that brought this to an end. But once again, lots of chatter. Mostly speaking, racing social media clapped and applauded. But there was lots of chatter both ways about this and if there should have been a penalty. So what do we think? Justified penalty or no?
I'm gonna do something that people might not like, but I'm gonna fence straddle here and say yes,
Oh
it was
no.
like worth the penalty, but also no at the same time. I'm gonna say like no, the penalty wasn't warranted just because it's like it technically was like a self-solving issue. It was a self-addressing issue. Like eventually, again, the two teams like they fought it out, and basically fought to the death over it. Not literally, but eventually, like the problem solved itself. They handled the dispute on track, and you know what happened happened. Um, so I don't really know if like race control really needed to get necessarily involved there, but I guess like they might have done it just because they did give the 48 a penalty, like for blocking and kind of like I guess it's the same team beef, and then the Corvette a penalty for like I guess just straight up like punting somebody going into a turn. Um, but then I also say yes because like I feel like this also is. I mean, granted, it's IMSA, but I feel like this not giving a penalty might have the potential to have this like snowball and get out of control pretty quickly if you set the precedent that yeah, you can just like again send somebody to the outer stratosphere and you don't get penalized for it, and then you're gonna have people just like straight up like egregiously like wrecking the dog fuck out of each other for whatever freaking reason. And it's like, do you really want to see that happen? Not really, because I mean, sure, is it fun to see people wreck each other? I mean, not all the time. Most of the time, it's better if if people are racing each other clean, because eventually it does get to be just kind of a little bit boring. And honestly, it's just like, bleh, it's like, okay, like, can we actually race? Like, is there any, like, can we actually have, like, clean execution of racecraft here? Because I also don't think IMSA needs to go, like, full on, like, NASCAR in the sense that, like, the whole, like, boys have at it thing. Or in this case, since there's everybody, since there's different genders in IMSA, be guys and gals, everybody else, have at it. I don't think we need to go that far. Um, and I guess this might be like an age old debate of like, yeah, should race control be a little bit more hands off and let drivers have their let drivers, up to their own devices, or should they have more of a firm guiding hand and step in when they need to? But those are my thoughts.
And as self-aggrandizing as I was with my groan, truth be told, I actually feel largely the same. On the one hand, yes, this was a problem that solved itself. They fought themselves to attrition, and ultimately nobody really won because we didn't get a class win for Pratt Miller or Paul Miller Racing.
No, fucking Mustang won it because everybody was too busy. I mean, to be fair, Mustang. I mean, I was hating on them the whole race mainly because I felt like the cars were cheated up, and I honestly feel like even to this day that they still are, that they definitely were cheated up. But it's like they were in the best position out of anybody because all they had to do was wait until again, like BMW and Corvette fought themselves to death, and they did, and then come in at the last second and say thank you very much and take the victory from both of them.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I say, it was a problem that solved itself. They fought, nobody won. Um, and this was linked to some battles on track, which culminated in some behavior that you know BMW didn't like, Corvette didn't like. But like I said, this was a problem that this was a problem with self-fulfilling prophecy is sort of that's the phrase that I'm looking for here. So with that in mind, all's well. But yes, I understand not wanting to open the floodgates to, I think when we were in the Twitter space for the last couple hours, I think I called it street justice, not wanting to open the door to that. So anytime a driver or team feels aggrieved, then suddenly, they go full kill and, annihilate somebody. Like that's understandable. So and like you said, generally the way of IMSA is not the, boys have at it attitude. So it's I understand why the penalty was given. And I wasn't surprised one iota, because I mean race control, it did not take them long. I don't think the Corvette and the BMW had gotten out of the runoff area yet when race control was on the blower about a number 4 penalty. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, especially with these two teams as the season progresses, is this going to be a case of things that what happens at Daytona stays at Daytona, and now they're will have a bit of a truce moving forward, or if this is going to be, or if this is a preview of what we're going to see basically all season, and it's just going to be a war in GTD Pro between these two teams, these two cars. So that I am curious about. Thoughts?
Um, I mean, I feel like you know it would actually be like fun to see a rivalry between these two teams. Honestly, I mean, again, barring it doesn't get too out of control. But I think it would be fun. Honestly, I mean, I don't know when the last time there was like a big like rivalry in like GTD and like GTD Pro and stuff like that. So it could possibly be pretty interesting. I don't know, and it now seems to be that this is Paul Miller Racing's villain origin story at this point. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, yeah, like you said, we'll have to see what happens. It's funny, I think if you want to deem heroes and villains, um, um, I I think definitely Paul Miller is kind of the villains of this. I think because it's funny, there were some shots of folks in the stands and the cheers when the Corvette, when Nico annihilated Vanderland in the BMW. I was actually a little surprised by. Um, But
I
but
was
yeah, well,
actually like, it was really funny, but then like, I guess I don't know. It's possible that the one car, you know, had done stuff prior, like earlier, like during the night hours, and they
mhm,
weren't as well behaved as I thought they were. You know, they weren't good boys. It's possible. Apparently, I mean, I saw like AO Racing put out a tweet like sometime during like the night, um, where they said that I think it was like Klaus Bachler was in the car at the time. I guess he was saying that like Madison Snow was like bumping into him constantly. So it's
mhm.
like maybe nobody on this lineup is as innocent as I thought they were, um, and that maybe like people were cheering because they saw stuff that maybe I didn't see, and maybe they were kind of just like the terrorists. Maybe they were just terrorizing the whole GTD pro like class, the whole race, and I just didn't know it. But I don't know.
Yeah, I had seen the same thing from AO referencing Madison being a bit difficult to race. So yeah, I think you're possibly onto something, and that also might have been why. But and that's actually the other piece of this. The minute that Paul Miller gets effectively some support from BMW, they start doing this. It doesn't look good. Um, that like literally in the first, well, I say first. I know technically like you've got the war and blah 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 blah, but like the first race, and suddenly they start acting like they're all that. So we'll have to see what happens, but Paul Miller is going to have a difficult season because nobody's going to give them an inch if if Daytona is any indication for how they're going to carry themselves going forward. Um, but yeah, that's yeah, it's a lot. Like I said, in some ways, it's both funny and kind of disappointing to kind of see all of this shake out. Um, I don't know how IMSA and like stewarding and officials. I don't know how that works. I'm wondering if they maybe sat everybody down to have a little bit of a chat after the race, or maybe in some point between now and Sebring, if they're gonna sit basically go okay, and this is how we handle our emotions. We do this, not this.
A group
So
therapy session for everybody.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know quite what's going to come from this. I would be surprised to not see some communications from IMSA publicly facing, given the firestorm that this set off on socials everywhere. But only time will tell. Uh, but moving on, um, the coming into the dying breaths of this year's Rolex 24. Um, the race would come down overall slash in GTP. Um, would come back to the number 7 Porsche Penske with Philippe Nasser behind the wheel, and the number 60 of Blomqvist, because he was able, and this was in the number 60 Acura, he was able to get around the number 6 Porsche Penske, and they would, basically after this final full course yellow, they went at it for a little bit. Sorry, Philippe Nasser was ultimately able to ward off Blomqvist and get a back-to-back Daytona win. The number 8 Tower Motorsports LMP2 would be the class victor there. As we said, because the BMW and Corvettes fought themselves to attrition, the number 65 would win GTD Pro. But we did get a Corvette. The number 13 AWA won in GTD. And it's wild to think of an AWA Corvette winning in class after basically one of their owners functionally rage quit the series. Anthony, was it Mattia? I think is his last name. Um, yeah, just rage quit the series. And then less than a year later, because didn't he get all pissy after Sebring? I think with the cars.
I don't remember when it was, but I remember it was just like basically like an Instagram post rage quit, and it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well
Yeah,
that's a thing.
Yeah, basically lightly used Z06R GT3 for sale, or lightly raced. It's just like, oh my god. But yeah, so to go from that to then winning in class is just a hell of a turnaround. Um, but also a fun stat is that Nick Tandy is quite possibly the first driver ever to win, I guess what we're calling the sports car Grand Slam. He's done Le Mans, Daytona. What are the other ones again?
Nürburgring,
Nürburgring, yeah.
Spa.
Okay. Which is kind of wild, actually. Um, and it's also wild how long it took, because I mean, Nick Tandy goes back to Porsche's LMP1 days. Actually, he dates back technically a little bit before that, I think. Um, so, it took what, a decade? A little more than a decade to get it done, but he did it. But yeah, that's just a fun stat that, basically Nick Tandy has won sports car racing effectively. It's like, all right, homeboy, you can retire now, I think. But with that, I guess now is about the point in the show where we sit and we review, and we kind of sit and we chat and we reflect. So, I mean, it's all the customary questions. I guess we'll start surprising teams and drivers. It could be good surprising or bad surprising. I don't know quite how you want to frame that. I'll leave that up to you, but
I mean, the fact that like AWA won in the class, like I would definitely say is surprising, especially like given how last year went for them. Last year was very rough, and for them to turn it around so quickly and in a very like solid way is pretty impressive to me. Um, Obviously, like I don't really know. Like obviously, I was impressed with like Onlauer. Honestly, I was impressed with like at least the number 5 like customer Porsche. Like I was pretty impressed with how everybody was doing um in that car. Um, that's really the most like surprising, at least for me. I guess I could say like kind of going branching into like the other category, which is like disappointing in like struggle bus, but like Cadillac was honestly very surprising just how much they were on the struggle bus and they were kind of stragglers compared to um just the rest of like the GTP class. It just kind of was unexpected given how they usually are pretty quick here. But it just seemed like they were really nowhere. The 31 car had obviously like had some glimpses of pace and at one point had led the race. But like the Wayne Taylor cars were really nowhere for most of the race. It was kind of just again very weird. I don't know if it was because like this is like I mean Wayne Taylor Racing has been with Cadillac before, at least in the DPI era, and they're coming back with Cadillac again. So I don't know if it's kind of like first race jitters and they're still getting used to being with Cadillac, but again like with the GTP car instead of a DPI. um I don't know if that was what it was or what, but Cadillac didn't really have that great of a race. Mercedes was also pretty surprising that like a Mercedes won in class last year and then like they were pretty much on the struggle bus as well, surprising. um BMW was pretty surprising, at least for like the GTP class. You know, I would say that was very much an improvement from previous years. It seemed like previous years they again were very, very slow at Daytona. But it seems like they might have figured out what's going on, and they were a lot quicker than they have been again in previous years. And again, they were in contention for a podium and honestly a win. At least the 24 car was, for most of the race up until like the very end when the porpoising started and like everything kind of just fell apart from there. Um, but I think maybe it looks like they're starting to make some progress.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, I'm in a similar camp. For me, certainly was surprising positives that the fact that the Mustangs turned it around. I mean, bits of the rear end were blowing up this time last year, and that didn't happen. And then there was real pace. I mean, again, last year the Mustangs had shown some glimpses of pace, um, but they seemed to really, I mean, obviously strung it all together because, I mean, they won in class this year. Um, ditto the Corvettes, not just AWA, but this sort of Z06R GT3 program as a whole. We seem to have finally figured out the window that these cars work in. And that's very encouraging to see, because I was, I mean, we talked about it. I was more than just a little bummed several times last year when it's just like, oh, these cars are awful. Um, but no. And so I'm kind of hoping we maybe will get a class win for the factory team this year. Um, but yeah, so the fact that the Corvettes have some real pace now is fun. Um, again, surprises. Yeah, definitely Andlauer in the number 5 Proton car. Absolutely. Like, um, and it's less that and it's less about Andlauer and more just that overall that car was as fast as it was. And I could say the same about Kamui and the 40 Cadillac. Again, we know Kamui is him. That's not really a surprise. Um, but just that he took a car that was, well, frankly, nigh on useless and drug it to a comfortable lead in class, before his teammate proceeded to throw it away the very next stint. But, honestly, I think the 40 could have been in contention. Put Kamui in for the closing stint. And I think it's potentially um, uh, Nasser, Blomqvist, Kobayashi
That
to
would have been
close out that
cinema.
race.
That would have been
Yes.
cinema. I would have loved to see that battle play out.
Yeah, that would have been incredible. But I think that that's potentially how that goes if Delatraz doesn't spin it in front of the field at, hour 6 or whenever that was, hour 7. Um, now as for disappointing, uh, and I guess it's not. Well, actually, I guess it is disappointing because it fits. That wasn't really a surprise. Disappointing. It's faff. It's just this string of shit luck with shit cars just continues. Um, I understand on paper why at the time, given how bad the BOP was on the Porsche, why it may have made sense to leave. It's like, but you then took this just fucking dog shit McLaren, and then it was frying pan to the fire by then deciding the following year that you're going to swap to the Lamborghini, which, because the Temerario GT3 is incoming here shortly. So it wouldn't surprise me if Lamborghini is starting to wind down support and development for these cars a bit. And also, it's the fact that you've had 3 different chassis in 3 different years. There's zero continuity between these cars. And it's like, and I don't know how forthcoming the manufacturers are about like sharing data and setups to incoming teams about trying to get them started and going. I know GM, I know with the way with Cadillac and Corvette, I know it's a pretty shared pool, but I don't know if all of the other manufacturers operate the same way. So it's like if you're jumping in cold with, twice, it's like I don't know how you expect to be successful. So it's just I really wish they would find a chassis and either develop it or stick with it, but it's just another lost year for FAF as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and then I also would say Lexus was very disappointing too, very much on the struggle bus. It seemed like at least the 14 car went behind the wall, and it went behind the wall at one point during the night, and then it seemed like for the rest of the time they were constantly getting black flagged for whatever reason, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of just went downhill. I mean, I can't really say if it really went downhill because I don't think they were ever uphill to begin with. But it was just it was just honestly awful for them. Um, I don't know what the reason for that is because usually Lexus is pretty decent overall. At least Vassar Sullivan usually is pretty decent overall with this car. I mean, maybe it could be because like this particular Lexus is at the end of its lifespan, and I think supposed to be a new car next year, and maybe after that things will start looking up. But I don't know, Daytona was just very torrid for them. I have no clue why.
Yeah, and I had the same thought. I'm like, okay, well, this car is old as shit. I mean, it's 10 years old this year, I think. 10 or 11 years old this year, which is ancient in race car terms.
It's basically the same age as the like IndyCar, like Dallara, whatever, 12 car.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, I mean, this car is older than my nephew. Um, he's 8. So it's just like I said, I think it's an ancient car, but yeah, but all the mechanical black flags, certainly that was death by 1,000 paper cuts. There might have been decent, potentially podium contending pace from that car. But when you're getting mechanically black flagged, it feels like every hour, then you're not going to get anywhere because you just lose so much time with drive-through penalties. Um, so yeah, that's a bummer, but yeah, I think it's supposed to be called like the LFR or something that's going to replace this car. We've spotted it testing quite a bit over the last about 18 months, testing in Japan. So hopefully we'll get one soon. But yeah, no, Vassar Sullivan was frankly uncharacteristically bad this race. I'm trying to think for like surprises. Definitely BMW. I know we've said this before, and I am absolutely prepared to have egg on my face later. But it feels like this is the beginning of them finding, again, some real pace. And I'm genuinely excited to see what happens over the course of the year with this program after lots of false starts and, well, like I said, the car just being trash. It feels like they finally got something. And then actually on the flip side with disappointing, the SC, I mean, we talked about it at the top of the show, but the SC63 program from Lamborghini has just been atrocious, and I'm not really sure what they're doing. So, but the funny thing is, for me, there weren't really any clear drivers that were, at least for me, that were struggle bus. It seemed like it was usually car related more so than driver related this year. I don't know if you have somebody, but I don't.
No, other than like again, like the very odd errors that some folks were making
Mm-hmm.
occasionally. Um, Honestly, it was mainly like car stuff as well.
Yeah. So, and I guess kind of with that, any thoughts about kind of do we think that we can kind of infer anything about the coming season from Daytona necessarily? About
I
car
mean,
or just any general expectations?
I don't know. I mean, again, I'm hoping that again we're finally seeing the light with again this BMW prototype program, especially since again they should have kind of the tie should have been deepened since they're kind of like in sharing like the same driver pool for both WEC and IMSA, so it should be a little bit better. And honestly, I feel like I'm gonna have to wait and see how like how Sebring and the rest of the season goes for both sides, both WEC and IMSA, to firmly say whether or not I feel like the program is finally seeing the light. Because, I mean, again, for all we know, what happened at Daytona could have just been fugazi. I don't know. Um, so we'll just have to wait and see. Um, I don't know if I'm expecting, but again, we kind of touched on it a little bit. But the Pratt Miller and Paul Miller beef, I don't know if that's going to continue outside of Daytona. It's possible it does. I mean, you might have Paul Miller just beefing with everybody at this point, since they possibly could have been beefing with other teams um, at Daytona more than just like the Corvettes. Um, but again, a rivalry wouldn't bother me. I would be okay with that. I mean, as long as nothing egregious that happened, as long as not the same egregious shit that happened at Daytona, as long as that doesn't happen, I would be fine. I mean, if they're able to keep it together, I do see them eventually getting a win, at least a class win. Because honestly, I feel like at least the BMW like M4 GT3 Evo, I feel like is kind of OP. I mean, it could have been the fact that they didn't get bopped um that much at Daytona because honestly, I was expecting the car to get bopped. Honestly, I was expecting a nerf coming for that car because it did win on debut, and the debut race was a 24-hour race. So, and it also won the very next weekend at another track as well. So I'm like, first first month of the year, and the cars won 2 races. I was like, yeah, that nerf is definitely coming, regardless of how they do in practice and qualifying. But I mean, the BOP could be a little bit worse next time, and then they're actually not as competitive. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, and certainly as for me, we'll have to see. First of all, we finally get we get Valkyrie for Sebring, and I could not be more excited. I hope they chop the fucking mufflers off and let the V12 wail, because that will be incredible if they do. Um, that it will be a noise that would feed families for generations. Um, but so that's exciting. Again, I'll be much like how we're unsure if BMW's pace is a mirage. I will be interested to see if maybe Lamborghini can pull a rabbit out of a hat and like not have the car either break or just be shit for 12 hours at Sebring. Um, so I'm curious about that. Um, yeah, I am curious to see what the lasting sort of ripple effects are going to be from apparently Paul Miller terrorizing the entire GTD Pro field. We'll see if Corvette is the only one that continues to take it to him, or if we'll see if other folks might be a little emboldened by that and try their own hands, which that could get very messy very quickly if the latter turns out to be the case. Um, I'll be interested to see if the Mustangs continue on form moving forward, because I mean the Mustangs have been bananas quick all week, and so, are they going to get, bopped hard to peg them back a little bit? Or are they going to continue their sort of uh, what felt kind of like domination? Now, to be clear, the Mustangs fell off a bit at night. That was what allowed the BMW and the Porsche, or the BMW and the Corvette, sorry, to close in and eventually overtake. But so I guess that's kind of the flip side to that. But yeah, no, there are a few threads from this that I'll be interested to see how they kind of interweave in through the season moving forward. Um, if Daytona was anything to go by, this could be one hell of a season, honestly. And I'm very excited.
We will be there no matter what.
Yes. But any wise words, question, comments, concerns, closing thoughts before we wrap?
No.
Well,
We'll see everybody at Bathurst. Or, well, we're
yes.
not actually going to Bathurst. I don't know why I'm phrasing it like we're flying to Australia, but we'll cover the race.
Yeah, we will cover the race. I was just about to say I'm not going to Bathurst because I'm going to be in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, northern Michigan, for a snowdrift rally for all of you grassroots rally people. The weekend to Bathurst. Um, so I'll be off freezing my ass off in the middle of nowhere, getting sprayed in the face by Travis Pastrana. Um, but but yeah, no, I was definitely excited for Bathurst. I'll have to stream it when we're back at the Airbnb because the race won't be over when we're done that day. But yeah, we will absolutely cover it. We'll sit and chat about it. And well, we'll kind of explore the kind of the rumble on the mountain. But with that, folks, this has been another episode of Chicanery. We have been your hosts, Danny and JP. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, everyone.